Al Pacino stopped talking. Not a pause. Not a breath. He stopped, completely, the way a man stops when something reaches him from a place so far back in his life that the present moment cannot hold it. His eyes went somewhere else. His hands, which had been moving the entire conversation, went still in his lap. And Jimmy Fallon's mouth opened, and nothing came out. Not a word. Not a sound. He sat there watching Al Pacino disappear inside himself, and for 11 seconds neither man moved. It was a Wednesday night taping. November 2021. The Tonight Show. Al Pacino was promoting a new film, a prestige drama, the kind that gets made for him specifically, for what he brings simply by being in the room. Standard stuff. A legend at 81, making a rare television appearance. The audience had arrived expecting fire and charisma and the particular electricity that follows Al Pacino everywhere he goes. They were not expecting silence. Neither was he. Al Pacino walked onto that stage the way he has always walked into every room in his life, like a man who has already decided what is going to happen. Not arrogance. Something older than arrogance. A certainty earned across 6 decades of work that has no equivalent in any other American actor alive. The audience did not just applaud. They rose. He smiled. That specific Al Pacino smile, small and private and a little dangerous. And he settled into the chair across from Jimmy with the ease of a man who has been inside his own skin for a very long time. They talked for 11 minutes. The film, the director, a story about learning a particular accent in 1973 that still made him laugh. Jimmy was loose and warm. Al Pacino was generous in the way only people who have nothing to prove can be generous. The room was alive. The band was easy behind them. Everything was right. Everything was flowing. And then Jimmy said, "I want to play you something, if that's all right." He reached beneath the desk and placed a small recorder between them. Al Pacino looked at it. He nodded. Jimmy pressed play. A voice came out of the recorder. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a voice. Male, older, speaking quietly in what sounded like a hallway or a stairwell, the slight echo of a small enclosed space. Not performing, not reciting, just saying a name. And Al Pacino stopped mid-sentence. His hands went still. His eyes left the room entirely. And the entire studio froze. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1966. Al Pacino wasn't always Al Pacino. Not the Al Pacino who has stood at the center of the American stage and screen for 50 years. Not the man whose voice and face have become part of the permanent furniture of this country's imagination. In 1966, Al Pacino was 26 years old, living in a single room in Hell's Kitchen on the west side of Manhattan. Eating when he could, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, and going to auditions that almost never called him back. He had been doing this for 4 years. He was beginning to understand what it might mean if it never worked. He was performing that winter in a small workshop production in the basement of a building on West 46th Street. Not a theater, a basement. Folding chairs. Maybe 60 seats, when all 60 were filled, which they rarely were. He remembers it was cold that winter, the kind of New York cold that comes through the walls of old buildings and settles into your hands and doesn't leave. He remembers he wore the same coat to every performance, because it was the only coat he owned. After a performance in January, a man was waiting near the door. 63 years old, short, with a wool cap pulled down over his ears, and a face that had been lived in thoroughly and without complaint. His name was Vincent Corsetti. He had been a stagehand at the Lyceum Theater on Broadway for 31 years. He had come tonight because a friend who worked at the building had mentioned there was a young actor worth seeing. Vincent had seen a great many actors in 31 years. He had learned to tell the ones who were reaching from the ones who were arriving. He had come to see which kind this was. He told Al Pacino that he had just watched something he had not seen in a very long time. He was not effusive about it. He was precise. He said, "Most actors I watch are trying to make me believe something. You were trying to find something. That's different. That's the thing." Al Pacino, who had been told by 2 casting directors that same week that his look was too ethnic, his energy too interior, his style too quiet for film. Al Pacino stood in that cold doorway and did not know what to do with what Vincent Corsetti had just said to him. They talked for 2 hours. Vincent told him about a production of Death of a Salesman he had worked on in 1951, about watching an actor named Thomas find the moment in the second act when Willy Loman understands everything and accepts nothing, and how the entire crew had stopped moving. Not because they were told to. Because they forgot they were working. Vincent said he had spent 30 years looking for that again. The stopping, the moment when the machinery of the theater disappears, and there is only a human being telling the truth. Al Pacino listened to all of it. Then he asked Vincent a question he had never asked another person in his life. He asked him what to do when you were not sure the truth was in you, when you reached for it in a scene and found nothing. Vincent was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It's always in you. The question is whether you're willing to be the person it happens to." Vincent reached into the pocket of his coat and took out a small card, the kind used for employee schedules, thick paper stock, printed on one side. He turned it over to the blank side. He wrote a single sentence in a handwriting that was slow and deliberate, the handwriting of a man more comfortable with tools than pens. He handed it to Al Pacino. He said, "Keep this. Read it when you reach and find nothing." Then he put his cap back on, said goodnight, and walked out into the January cold. And Al Pacino never saw him again. The following year, Al Pacino was cast in The Indian Wants the Bronx off Broadway. Then, The Merchant. Then, The Basic Training of Pavlo Hummel. Then, the audition for The Godfather. The world split open the way worlds split open for very few people, completely and all at once. He thought about Vincent Corsetti sometimes, in dressing rooms, on sets, in the long hours between takes when he was reaching and finding nothing and reading the card until the something came. He never tried to find him. He did not know where to look. And he had come to understand that some people are placed in your life for a single conversation, and that what they give you is diminished by the search for more. He kept the card in every wallet he owned for 55 years. He had it transferred, carefully. Each time he replaced one. The paper had gone soft at the corners, the ink slightly faded, but the sentence still clear. He had never shown it to anyone. In the spring of 2021, a woman named Rosa sent a letter to Al Pacino's production company. She was Vincent Corsetti's granddaughter. Vincent had passed away in 2009, at 86 years old, still living in the same apartment in the Bronx he had lived in since 1962. In the months after his death, going through his belongings, Rosa's mother had found a small reel-to-reel recorder, the portable kind stagehands used to record blocking notes, with a single short recording on it. A date label in Vincent's handwriting. January 14, 1966. Rosa's mother had passed the recorder to Rosa when she died. Rosa had finally, in 2020, had the recording transferred to a digital file. She had listened to it. She had spent a year finding out who the young man's name in the recording was. Then, she had written the letter. On the recording, Vincent Corsetti's voice, caught in what sounded like a stairwell, quiet and slightly echoing, was saying a single name. Not performing it. Not announcing it. Just saying it, the way a man says the name of something he wants to remember. He was saying, Al Pacino. Behind the scenes, Al Pacino had made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. He had responded to Rosa's letter within a week. He had spoken to her by telephone. He had asked her one thing, whether she would be willing to come to New York to a taping and to trust him with what happened next. Rosa had said yes. He had arranged for her to be in the audience that Wednesday night in November. He had told no one at The Tonight Show what was really happening. He had asked Jimmy Fallon privately, before the taping, to have a recorder on the desk with the audio file already loaded. Jimmy had asked him what was on it. Al Pacino had said, "A man saying my name," 55 years ago, before anyone knew it. Now Jimmy understood. The recording played for 11 seconds. Vincent Corsetti's voice, quiet and clear and caught perfectly by the recorder. Al Pacino. The studio was completely silent. Al Pacino's hands were still in his lap. His eyes were not in the room. Jimmy Fallon tried to speak. His mouth open. Nothing came out. He tried again. Still nothing. He pressed his lips together and looked out at 300 people and shook his head slowly. Because there were no words equal to what was happening, and he knew it, and he stopped trying to find them. The director in the control room did not cut to commercial. Questlove's drumsticks had not moved in 40 seconds. One of the camera operators had taken a step back from his camera and was standing with his hand over his mouth. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Al Pacino reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Slowly, deliberately, he held between two fingers a small rectangle of paper, soft at the corners, the color of old ivory. A single sentence written in faded ink. He set it on the desk between them with both hands, the way you set down something irreplaceable. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked out at the audience, toward the third row on the aisle, where a woman of perhaps 50 was sitting with her hands folded in her lap. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper, but caught perfectly by his microphone. Rosa, the woman in the third row, looked up. Her eyes went wide. Her hand went to her mouth. Jimmy Fallon found his voice. It broke immediately. "Folks," he said, "something is happening here that I did not expect. And I think we all need to just be here for a second." Al Pacino stood up. He picked up the card. He walked to the edge of the stage, and then he stepped down from it. The way a man steps off something he has been standing on for 50 years, carefully, deliberately, his eyes never leaving the third row. He stopped in front of Rosa Corsetti. He held the card out with both hands. "Your grandfather wrote this," he said, his voice barely holding, "in a doorway in January 1966. When I had nothing, when I was nothing. And I want you to understand, I have carried this into every room I have ever performed in. Every single one." Rosa's voice was very quiet. "He never told us. He wouldn't have." Al Pacino's hands were shaking around the card. That wasn't why he said it. "What did it say?" Jimmy asked from the stage, his voice barely above a whisper. Al Pacino turned the card over. He read it aloud, slowly, in a voice that made 300 people stop breathing. "The truth is always in you. Be willing to be the person it happens to." Rosa put her hands over her face. Al Pacino held her hands inside his. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Neither of them moved through any of it. Al Pacino gave the card to Rosa Corsetti that night. She has it now, in a frame, on the wall of her apartment in the Bronx, 3 blocks from the building where Vincent Corsetti lived for 47 years. Beside it hangs a photograph of Vincent in the wings of the Lyceum Theater, taken in 1958. He is looking at the stage. He is not looking at the camera. Al Pacino sent Rosa a handwritten letter the following week. She has read it many times. She says the thing that stays with her most is a single line near the end. He saw something in me before I could see it myself. That is the rarest thing one person can do for another. Vincent Corsetti never took a curtain call. He moved sets in the dark so other people could stand in the light. He went home on the subway every night for 31 years. He stopped once, in a cold doorway in January, to tell a young man something true. Some people light the stage without ever standing on it.